In TypeScript class, you can create only one constructor optionally. The constructor is a special method that executes automatically every time when you create a new object for the class. The constructor can initialize the properties of newly created object and also can contain any initialization logic that needs to be executed when a new object is created for the class. In TypeScript, the constructor name should be constructor. The constructor can receive one or more parameters but cannot return value. First, you will create an object by writing the new class name. Now the object is created with all the properties and methods as per the definition of the class. The default value of all the properties is undefined by default. Then the constructor gets executed where it can initialize the properties that overrides the default value that is undefined. Now the object is ready to use with all the properties initialized. In C: TypeScript folder, I have created a file called constructors.ts and copy the same program from the previous lecture. In this application, we have created a class called employee with some properties and methods. And each time after creating object, we are repeating the same syntax to initialize the properties of every object. Instead of repeating the same syntax for every object, you can make it common by using the constructor. In real-time applications, it is recommended to write the constructor for every class. So, adding a constructor in the employee class, the constructor name should be constructor, and optionally you can receive the parameters into the constructor. That is, for example, I am receiving the 3 parameters: employee name, salary, and is active. And also we can specify the data type for each parameter. For example, employee name is string, salary is number, is active is boolean. So we have 3 values in our hands now. The user can pass any values to these parameters while creating object. And we are going to assign the values of the parameters into the respective properties of the object. For example, the property called employee name equal to the parameter called employee name. Here, the this keyword represents the current object which is being created right now. For example, the this keyword represents the first object of the employee class, and the phrase this.employee name represents employee name of the current object. And the phrase just employee name represents the parameter called employee name. And you can copy all the values of the parameter into the respective properties. Now, when you try to compile the program, you will get errors every time when you try to create object without passing the arguments. So you must supply the values for the parameters of the corresponding constructor while creating object. For example, I am passing the arguments to the parameters of the constructor. So these argument values will be assigned into the respective parameters. That means the first value into first parameter, second value into second parameter, and so on. And the same values will be copied into the properties of the first object that is created with the syntax new employee. That means the object contains 3 properties with respective values initialized. So these 3 statements of initialization of properties is not required now because the same process has been done in the constructor. And in the same way, passing the arguments to the constructor while creating the second object. Doing the same for the third object. Now we can notice that the code is simplified. That means there is no code duplication for initializing the properties for every individual object. But remember, in the constructor, it is not compulsory to initialize all the properties of the object. If you don't initialize any property, its default value will be undefined. Now let us execute the program and see the final output. Compile the program by using tsc command and run the program by using node command. It gives correct output as expected. This is how to work with the constructors in TypeScript.